I read all these books so you don't have to. Building a Second Brain, Thinking Fast and Slow, Grit, Can't Hurt Me, Ego is the Enemy, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, 12 Rules of Life, The Creative Act, and Think and Grow Rich. There's definitely common traits between all of these books. I think I would divide them into 4 different categories: money, actionable life things, motivational, and then understanding the brain. So under the money category, we would have Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Think and Grow Rich. I know these are probably 2 of the most famous ones, but what I learned from them is a bit different. However, my favorite category is that actionable category because it literally just gives you so many things to act on after reading the book. So in this category, we'd have Building a Second Brain, Grit, and 12 Rules for Life. So good. For the motivational category, because I know we just can't get enough of those, Can't Hurt Me, it was different. I read a lot of motivational books, and at the end, it kind of just seems like the same thing. Not this one. This one was very different, and I almost didn't read it. And The Creative Act, I would also categorize under motivational, even though this is like the perfect, like living room, coffee table book to have to always flip back to whenever you just need that spark to ignite that creativity, which everyone actually has. I learned that from the book. And last but not least, under the brain category, basically understanding how we think, how humans act and why we act the way we do, would be Thinking Fast and Slow, and then Ego is the Enemy. A really good one. If you could only read one out of this entire 9 list of books, the one I would recommend you to pick up is Building a Second Brain. I'll tell you why in just a moment, and I'll explain the main concept that I took from that book. But basically, there's similar concepts or theories under each category, which leads you to think, like, if you can sum up 3 books in one category and take the main concept away, I think you're learning a good chunk. And for the money, you'd be surprised. There are thousands of books that I've already read, plus these in this category, and there's one thing they all have in common. Some of you might not like this, but it's manifesting. They don't call it manifesting. Actually, none of them do, but that's just how we all understand it. It's basically the thinking that happens before the actual situation actually arrives into your life. So for example, the book Think and Grow Rich, which is so famous, like it literally was written by Napoleon Hill, who studied thousands of successful, influential leaders like Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, Thomas Edison, so many cool people. And he developed this concept that you literally have to make a 6-step thing, write down the specific amount of money that you want, the date that you want to receive it, how you're going to do it, like a game plan that you can start today. And then he says to repeat it, make it all in one sentence, and repeat this twice a day in the morning and in the afternoon. He doesn't call it manifesting, but it sure does sound like manifesting. Instead, he gives it the name auto-suggesting. So you're like teaching yourself to become this thing that you want to attract. And hey, I don't know about you, but if books after books after books from different authors of totally different perspectives, different angles, are saying one thing in common, you might as well try it. Now, under the actionable like life category, I'm gonna teach you this one thing that is probably going to blow your mind. Hopefully it does, just like it did mine. And it comes from the book Building a Second Brain, and it's basically their para concept. So the book basically talks about how we're receiving information from so many different angles, from the social media that we consume, to the people we surround ourselves with, to the podcasts, to the books. Like everything is so much information, yet we don't know how to store it. And that's where our second brain comes into play. But how you organize it is the main part of it in order to use it in the future and not just become like that notes thing that you have on your phone that you never look back at. So the para concept comes into play. You have projects, areas, resources, and then your archive. You can easily remember it by thinking of the word para. So you'll grab your note app. It has to be digital. Whatever you use, it's up to you. But then you divide it into these 4 categories. Projects are things that have an end date, meaning one day when you finish it, that project will close. For example, delivering something to a client, working on remodeling your kitchen, planning your family vacation, things like that, that you do it, and a closelet. Then you have areas. I like to think of this as the main pillars that my life revolves around. So these are ongoing things that I'm concentrated on, I'm focused on, and just a lot of my time goes into it. So for example, work, my work is ongoing. Building healthy habits, that's something that I'm super into that you guys have seen throughout this channel. Books, something of course that is going to continue to be an ongoing thing of the new books that I'm reading and the new concepts that I'm learning. And then you have your resources. So resources are things that don't fit into projects or areas, yet they're cool things that you'd like to keep top of mind. For example, when your coworker recommends the best places to eat in New York City, or when you're traveling like I am right now in Mexico and people give you like a list of recommendations, or you have the top spots that you want to visit. And then last but not least, you have your archive. Think of this as like your brain dumpster where you send everything that's just not that relevant at the moment, but it might be, let's say, in like a 3, maybe 4-year time span. Like you don't want to forget about it forever. So the goal is to sort your note app into these 4 categories, and then it's a lot easier for whenever you're consuming and you hear something relevant, you write it down inside that folder, and then you can actually get back to it, understand what you wrote, and put it into action. Under the motivational category, if there's 2 things that I'm taking away, it's these right here. Number 1, no one is special. And number 2, the reason why some people are able to accomplish things that you haven't is just because they're putting in more work. And like I mentioned, I know the motivation thing just gets a little boring after a while, but Can't Hurt Me was a different one. If you have the chance to pick it up, I would grab it because it's actually worth it. Like hearing his story and realizing that really no one is special. Like no one is born with that extra talent, and that's something that also comes from the book Grit. It's not talent that sets people apart like we like to think of it, but it's actually the grit and the work and the consistency that they've been putting in. Onto our brains. Oh gosh, our brains are something serious. I think from here what I'm taking away is that we have to learn to be able to control them. The more that we know how it functions and why it's doing the things it does, the more we can sympathize and understand that our brain's literal one function is to protect us, which is why it creates these fears and these different things that literally it's just doing to protect us. The more that we know that, the more we can control it and say, hey, don't worry, like I got this. And that way we're not letting it stop us, just like, let's say our ego stops us sometimes. And all of that is really learned and understood in the book Ego is the Enemy. So there you have it, 9 books in 1 month. Which one of these have you read? And should I do a full summary on one of these? Let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see you next week.